What's going on, everybody? Eric from Panola here, and we're continuing our trek through Security Plus SY0-601 with CompTIA because we want to work towards getting that Security Plus certification. And we offer that and much more at panola.edu. More on that in a minute. Now, in this one, we're covering Objective 1.4, which is given a scenario, analyze potential indicators associated with network attacks. And we'll be working out of chapters 3, 12, and 13 in our CompTIA Security Plus study guide that we are using in our panola.edu courses for cybersecurity. Now, we covered a little bit of this in the previous objective. Click on the tag in the top right corner. Did I do it right? Yes, I did. And get just for a little refresher. But we're going to dive a little bit deeper and focus more on the network side of things, because this potential attack may not just be isolated to an individual system. It could be propagating across the actual network. And oh no, what do we do? Well, the first thing that we need to do is get familiar with a couple of terms and different systems out there. And the first one that we're taking a look at is the Intrusion Detection System, or IDS for short. Now, this system can be placed on the host or network, and we'll touch on that in a minute. But this system is built to find any abnormalities on network traffic or even system traffic and just report. It detects. It doesn't do anything proactive. It's just detection only, and can alert us if it finds something based on its definition set. Hey, I found some traffic that may be in question. I'm just letting you know. Well, the next system that we have is a proactive system, and it's called Intrusion Protection System, which will actually report on the individual abnormality and do something to block it based on the actions that we have in rule sets determined by the definitions that we have for detection. So if it sees that a file is being sent across the network that we've defined already based on hash value, it sees it and says, you're not supposed to be there. Not only am I going to report, but I'm going to block it. And so that's one way that we can kind of proactively work against network propagation of anything malicious. Now, these systems can be host-based or network-based. And by context clues, I'm sure you've already got it. Host-based is on an individual system. It could be on a computer system. It could even be on a network device. But we're going to call that a host-based IDS or IPS, or HIDS or HIPS. So when the data is actually on that individual system, whether it's IDS or IPS, it will perform its function on that singular system level. Now, when we move over to network-based IPS or IDS or NIPS or NIDS, we're taking a look at actually putting systems on the wire as traffic is going across. Basically, this is an allowed man-in-the-middle attack. But we're doing it under the permission of our network owner or system owners, so it's legit, right? Just make sure you have that permission. We're taking a look at all the traffic that's going across, and if it meets that same rule set on the IPS side, it's going to report and actively do something based on our rule sets. Now, I talked about how we get that definition and the rule sets that we put in place, and there are two different ways that we can actually do this. See, the IDS and the IPS both can do this based on a signature-based definition set, which is if you see this, then do this, by something that's statically assigned in there. Or we have abnormality based, which is based on if it looks like this or matches some of these conditions, then do this. Abnormality based takes a little bit longer to perform on a network or system because it's requiring a lot more resources, but is a lot more flexible, hence requires more fine tuning. So if you see a lot of false positives, that may be an indicator that you have to go back and say, this isn't really what's supposed to be detected. Just define that abnormality-based definition set. Now, the rule set of what we do after what we get alerted with is where we figure out, hey, are we going to dump the traffic? Are we going to report? Or are we actually going to do something about this? And that's where the rule set comes in, based on how we define that traffic, whether it be good or bad. We'll dig down deep into that rabbit hole and figure out what exactly our network or systems are supposed to be broadcasting. So let's say we have a web server, right? And we have that web server going with HTTPS. It communicates over port 80 and 443 on TCP. Should it be communicating over port 25? I don't know. That's a decision for the actual organization and system or network administrator or CIO, CISO, etc., etc. It could be that that organization has made it to where that web server needs to use TCP port 25, for whatever reason. But if that's not normal, we need to have a baseline set on how we determine this. And one of the best ways to do this is that when that server is implemented right out of the gate, to take note of what services that actual system is utilizing. If that's a web server and we're only using 80 and 443 for network communication, then that's the baseline. If later on we find out that port 25 is open and communicating, that could be an indication of a compromise. Now, how do we find out and keep track of what's all actually happening with these systems? Well, that's where we need to be able to do network scans. And one of the best tools for this is Nmap. Now, in this little short video, I'm not getting into how to use Nmap. I'll come back on that in a little bit with a demonstration video. But when we run Nmap, we're just basically getting an assessment of that system or systems overall, because you can do one or you can do a whole network sweep. And based on the type of Nmap scan that we run, we'll actually come back with a report saying this is the type of system, this is the actual network addressing, the MAC address, and the ports that are being used, and the services that may be being used on that system as well. Because it tries to guess sometimes, because you can manually set, let's say, exchange email traffic to a non-standard port of port 80. Is that normal? No, but it can happen. And so when Nmap runs a sweep on that system, it'll say port 80 is open. That's HTTP, but you know, because you're the one that fixed it on your network, that that's actually email traffic. But that's the actual beginning of tightening down your network security and making sure that stuff doesn't propagate across the network that's not supposed to. And that's how we start to build that more secure environment to prevent attacks from happening. Well, we need to back up just a little bit and go deeper down the OSI model back to layer 1 and 2, because we have systems like 802.1x that allow us to be able to do security on those individual switch ports at the layer 2 level. And by doing so, we're saying a specific device or a specified device is the only thing allowed on this particular port. Or we can back up just a little bit, make it a little bit more broad and say all these devices based on their MAC address and some other criteria, if we want to do that, is allowed on our network overall. It could be on switch 1, could be on switch 2, could be on switch 3, etc. We can go as deep or as wide as we want on that particular configuration we implement. Now, we also need to keep in mind that this is a physical type of security, and there is physical security that we do need to adhere to within an organization for security purposes. If somebody's bringing in their own device, in that bring your own device environment, is that something that's allowed per our company policy? If it is, does it match the standards of what's actually being allowed in that BYOD environment? And as a security technician or administrator, we might want to take a closer look at what those devices are and get a physical log of what's actually happening. So that way, when we do our network sweeps and we do our security analysis, we can say this device has a known vulnerability if it does. Or we can say this device is connecting from this particular site if it is. Just things to keep in mind in that BOYD environment. And lastly, we're going to be touching on wireless for a little bit, because with network propagation is the word network, and it doesn't matter if it's physical or if it's logical. See, with wireless, we run into a couple of different things that we have to concern ourselves with, and one of the most important ones is the evil twin. An evil twin is a fake wireless access point on our network that looks just like a legitimate wireless access point that we've implemented. So let's say we have an organization and we have our wireless access point, just one of them for the building. A user who has brought in their BYOD device is trying to connect to that wireless access point. We've named it Access Point 1. And the user is trying to connect to Access Point 1, but now sees two of them on there. Which one do they connect to? Well, that's kind of confusing for the individual user, but for us, that tells us that somebody has set up an evil twin wireless access point trying to mimic what we have. And the reason that this is done is to be able to confuse that user with the BYOD device or any device and convince them to connect to the fake one so that we can see what traffic they're trying to send. We'll record all that traffic on that fake evil twin and try to get it to where we can get information from them to put on the original network. For instance, let's say that we have MAC security or 802.1x involved on the actual network that's in use. The evil twin brings in a non-suspecting user. They connect to it, and we've got their MAC address because we've captured it from Wireshark or some other program to capture that traffic data. Well, we take that information and we spoof a system that is now connected on the legitimate network with that fake information. Now that gets us past one layer of security. There are many more to go after that, but I'm sure you can see where this is going. Now, there's ways that we can get around this and kind of sniff them out, if you will. And one of them is called RF mapping, where we take devices that seek out our radio frequencies and map out in the building where these RF devices are originating from. They work kind of like heat maps, and the more red you get on them, the more closer you get into an RF signature. And you may be able to find fake wireless access points or evil twins that are in the building if you have them using this method. Now, lastly, on this one, I would encourage you to definitely keep a physical list of MAC addresses of your wireless access points, because in our example of access point 1, it's always going to have a MAC address on it. And the fake evil twin is going to have could have a different MAC address. And this would allow us to be able to sniff out on paper which one is the real one. So is it access point 1 or is it access point 1? Because the SSID, or the actual network name, is going to look the same to the user, but the MAC address is probably going to be a little bit different. Now, yes, there are ways to spoof a MAC address, but that's not what this course is about. We're just saying that's something to keep an eye out on. And that's the nickel and dime version of Objective 1.4. And in the next one, we'll continue on and start clearing everything out for Security Plus. I definitely encourage you to check out Panola.edu for some of the cybersecurity, networking, and even digital forensics programs that we have over there. And as always, smash that like and subscribe button. Tell your friends about it so they can learn about information security as well. And I hope to see you next time.